If you look at the 2018 election, 95% of blacks voted Democrat, which is like unbelievable. 67% of Hispanics voted Democrat and 75% of Asians voted Democrat. In 2020, the black number really didn't move much. It moved maybe a little bit. The Hispanic number went from 67 to 60, and then the Asian number went from 75 to 70. So there was a little bit of lost reliability in the 2020 election, but the voter turnout was so massive, it didn't really matter, because the big problem that Democrats have is not the unreliability of people of color. Since 60% of white people are voting Republican, that's their real problem. And then the other part that they have as a problem is that Democrats are really awful at showing up and voting.
The midterm elections are over, ballots are still being counted, and the dreaded red wave turned out to be a red ripple. Our friend Roy Casagranda joins Plutopia's Not Ready for Cable News players, John Lipkowski, Susie Sheeler, Screamish Joy, and Scoop Sweeney, as we dissect Election 2022.
Here we are, and the elections are not over.
Do they ever really end?
Well, it's kind of like rolling along slowly. Roy, do you think that the Democrats are gonna ultimately win Congress?
That's a great question. So right now, I've noticed a lot of news channels aren't calling Alaska, so I'm going to do it for them. Alaska's voting Republican. So now we got that out of the way. So now we're down to Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. As it stands, the Democrats in the Senate, the Democrats have 48, the Republicans have 49. So for the Republicans to win, they need 2 to make it 51. And for the Democrats to win, they need 2 to make it 50. So 2 of the 3 that are in the air need to go to one party or the other so they can take control. Nevada, at last I checked, was the Republican was 3 points ahead, but it were 75% of the votes counted. In Arizona, the Democrat was 5 points ahead, but it was 67% of the votes counted. So they're way too early to call either one. Like I wouldn't even bet up. Like I know it feels like, oh, the Democrat might win. Stuff. In the case of Georgia, they have already decided they're going to do the runoff, even though I don't think they're finished counting. I guess the assumption is that Warnock can't get over the majority threshold. So if the Democrats pick up Arizona and the Republicans pick up Nevada, we won't know who owns the Senate until December 6th. That's better than what we did 2 years ago, because 2 years ago they did it, I think it was January 6th, I think it was Insurrection Day when Georgia voted. And that was really annoying because it meant that the Congress was already seated, because it seats on January 3rd. So it wasn't like until January 8th, if I remember correctly. It took 5 days to figure out the Democrats had control of the Senate.
So how do you think that's going to go?
I think it's a coin toss.
A coin toss.
Yeah, it's a coin toss, and Kos is of course the first syllable in Cossack. I just don't know. I wouldn't bet money on it unless you're like 50-50 happy to lose it. The polls going in that I was looking at said that the Democrats should keep the Senate. So this is closer, I think, than at least the polls I was looking at indicated. So that's a little weird. But in the case of the House, the polls I was looking at, and what I've been telling my students is that the House will probably the Republicans will probably capture like 7 to 11 of the seats. They needed 5 to win. So worst case scenario, they win with a two representative majority. Best case scenario, they were probably going to win with like a 5. The Republicans were saying they were going to win with 50. And I just didn't see any of that data.
Yeah, and obviously that's not happening. You're mentioning polls. Do you believe? Do we have any reason to believe polls anymore? They kind of tend to be wrong a lot.
So they definitely have not since 2016, they have not been as accurate as they used to be. So there was a lot of anger about 2016 because Hillary Clinton was projected to win, and the polls kept saying she's going to win by like 2.8%. She ended up winning by 2%. To me, that's pretty accurate. I really don't see the problem there. But by 2018 and 2020, there definitely was a problem with the polling. And we know why. In the beginning, a lot of Republicans just simply refused to answer the polls. And so because it's supposed to be random, you hope that the Democrats are refusing to answer as frequently as the Republicans. That wasn't happening. Also, we now know that there's a population of people who just lie to the polls. So it's thrown the polls into doubt. Having said that, there's still some accurate data out there. And it looks like nationally, most of the polling I was looking at was pretty accurate.
Well, I read something that said that some of the really right-leaning polls that tend to, for whatever reason, skew to the right in the results that they have, they kind of inherently predicted that Donald Trump would win because they tend to lean that way. They tend to predict that Republicans are going to win. So because they were right about that when so many others were wrong, they got a sort of aura of respectability based on the fact that they were right in a situation where others were not right.
But
on the other hand,
they were right for the wrong reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it would be extremely hard to figure out how to conduct an accurate, realistically weighted poll to predict the outcome of a race, given how difficult it is to reach people, among other things. I mean, how do you actually get a good cross-section? When polling began, you could pick up a phone book and you could reliably assume that most of the numbers in there, if you dialed them, somebody would answer, and some of them would answer your questions, and you could kind of get a good cross-section that way. But now, no, you don't have phone books, and most of the cell phones now are I guess, unlisted, though the numbers are leaking all over the place. But also, people can, as I do, set their phone to screen out calls that are not from people that they recognize. So how do pollsters find the right connections to people to be able to come up with a sample that is truly representative of any group?
I mean, I think one of the problems that we've had with polls in recent decades actually was that the pollsters weren't doing their due diligence. So if you're going to do a sample set and if you do 1,000 people, so you got 1,000 people who respond, it used to be 50% of people would just hang up on you. So that meant you had to call 2,000 people to get 1,000 respondents. That gives you a 5% error margin. Well, in a close race, 5% it might be useless, right? If there's 2% between the two candidates, then you don't want a 5% error margin. If you do 1,500, you'd get a 2% error margin. And if you do 2,000 people, you get a 1% error margin. And I'm going to say something crazy that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter how many people you're polling, as long as the number is large enough. So in other words, if I'm polling 1 million people, it's still 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. If I'm polling 333 million people, it's the same numbers. Mm-hmm. Well, what was happening was pollsters were trying to just get out the data, and it was expensive to call 2,000 people. So they'd call 1,000 people and hope 600 answered, and then they would post their data. So that's one of the nice things about Real Clear Politics and 538 is they would take those polls and they would rate them, and then they would weight them on their accuracy, and then they would clump them together and try and get an answer. So if you're looking at just one poll, you need to know you don't really know anything. But if you look at them in the aggregate over time, there might be some information in there, even with the problem of cell phones and people refusing to answer. One of the things we might have to do in the red states is just build in the understanding that, if the polls say Beto's going to lose by 8 points, we know he's going to lose by 11 points, right? And just sort of overestimate the Republican vote.
Yeah, in the past, pollsters have assumed that people of color would be reliably Democratic, and of course that didn't really prove true in some cases this time around. Was that ever really a reliable assumption that people of color are going to go demo?
I mean, I think the answer is yes. So if you look at, but with a little bit of a caveat. So if you look at the 2018 election, 95% of Blacks voted Democrat, which is like unbelievable. 67% of Hispanics voted Democrat and 75% of Asians voted Democrat. In 2020, the Black number really didn't move much. It moved maybe a little bit. The Hispanic number went from 67 to 60, and then the Asian number went from 75 to 70. So there was a little bit of lost reliability in the 2020 election. But the voter turnout was so massive, it didn't really matter, because the big problem that Democrats have is not the unreliability of people of color. Since 60% of white people are voting Republican, that's their real problem. And then the other part that they have as a problem is that Democrats are really awful at showing up and voting. There's no reason that the Democrats should have lost this midterm. The reason lost the midterm is, I don't know, they have broken hands and broken feet and can't make it to the voting booth.
Yeah, and it's not the first time that's happened, though, because
it's every midterm, actually.
I'm like, doesn't it happen every time?
It's like every other election, the Democrats blow it. They stayed home.
If it's not the important one, I'm not going to do it. It's just like, it's like they can't understand how things are connected. Like the reason that we have inflation is that, well, we've got this Ukraine thing going on. We're kind of nervous about the whole UK not having any oil or gas during the winter, and so that's going to affect us on some level,
and
monetarily.
To your point, Susie, we need to shift the narrative for the Democrats, thinking that the big one is important, and start recognizing that the local elections are where we can make the most impact and start like moving it forward from that level up. And we don't show up for our local politicians that are really busting their ass. I mean, honestly, like they're really out there,
it
working
seems
hard.
Like
and
it seems to me like we did do that, like just like as soon as what's his dick won, everybody came out. We had the women's march, we had the Muslim gathering, we had everything. And it was just like, okay, the fatigue is going to set in at some point. And not only did fatigue set in, but it was almost like we've created our own backlash of apathy. And I'm so depressed about it.
So one of the things that was really shocking to me in 2017 is how quickly the protest movement stopped. I feel like by March, they were done. So it was like, wait, you protested November, December, January, February, March. You protested 5 months and you were done. I guess this isn't a repeat of the 60s.
Not at all.
And so that was disappointing. But then in 2018, we had record-breaking midterm election voter turnout. And then in 2020, again, right? And we broke the records for the last 120 years. And I think a lot of people were hoping that 2022 this was a new trend, that we were going to see more engagement. And it's kind of baffling that the Democratic voters just didn't feel like they needed to show up. For the record, the Republican voters didn't show up either. And so as a result, there wasn't a red wave, there wasn't a blue wave, there wasn't a wave at all. There was nothing. It was like a regular midterm election, like 2014 or 2010, where 30% of the population shows up.
Only it's much more consequential.
Right, because our democracy ends in 2 years.
Sure.
I'll tell you who did show up was big money, and a big oil and gas money, especially in Texas.
Especially in Harris County.
Yes, But
Oh,
yeah, and unfortunately, the big money generally is Republican, and yeah, there's some big money from Democratic supporters, but in Texas, oil and gas companies tend to funnel their money into a lot of campaigns, and you know that's a Republican campaign, not a Democratic one.
Well, so the Harris County thing that happened this year was mind blowing because so county judge, right? Lena Hidalgo is there. County judge is in Harris County is usually like a $300,000 race, and Lena Hidalgo had $2.3 million,
oops.
and the Republicans poured $9 million.
Wow.
We spent $11.3 million on a race that's normally $0.3 million. And it was like, where did all this money come from and why is it here? And the answer is Harris County is 1/4 of Texas's population. If you're the county judge, you can rig the next election, and they desperately wanted to be able to do that.
The county judge isn't just a judge, right? It's sort of like
Texas.
being mayor of the county,
It
isn't it?
is the mayor of the county. That's exactly what I tell my students. It's the person in charge.
Mhm.
So
insanity.
this was huge. And then she won, but she won by 2 percentage points, which was shockingly narrow. When you consider Beto won in Harris County by 9 percentage points. So if you were wondering, did the extra $7 million that the Republicans spend matter? It did, clearly, because it shaved 7 percentage points off of her victory.
And it really mattered to
What?
the local TV and radio stations and newspapers who got a lot of that money in advertising.
And then endorsed the Republican.
So how
I'm
did
very
she
concerned
manage to win?
about-
What? What
Go
was
ahead,
that?
Susie.
I was just gonna say I was very concerned about why about Uvalde not voting for Beto, and I don't understand why Abbott overwhelmingly took Uvalde voters. What in God's name is happening?
It's because Abbott heroically rode into Uvalde with a shield in one arm and a sword in the other, and attacked the gunman that was murdering all those poor school children and took him
said
down.
it could have been worse, and he said it could have been worse. So
I just, I mean, it is beyond. It's just beyond me how that happened.
Well,
How the people in that town voted against him.
yeah, watching some of the news footage of the various public meetings, a lot of the faces in charge were all white faces.
Mhm.
That tells you a lot about the power structure.
I mean, it always depends on who actually voted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
yeah.
is strange that Uvalde did go red, but it's also strange that
Substantially.
Texas went red.
it went substantially red, or at least 60% for Abbott. I mean,
Right.
to me it was surprising. I think, especially
And
because
Beto was there every day.
yeah. And
Well-
Abbott, I mean, in the beginning of Uvalde, when, Abbott comes out with his narrative, and then the next day he shows up going, hey, I just said what they told me. I mean, don't blame me. I mean, he was the epitome of lack of leadership from the moment that he started dealing with that. And
Yeah, but is that what
it's
people saw?
baffling to me how the narrative.
Is that what
That's
people
what I
saw, or did
saw.
they see the
That was what I saw.
guy
was
writing
it was
in
the
on
press
his?
conference.
No, I never saw him as a hero by any stretch. I saw him as someone whose own employees are too terrified to tell him the truth. That's what I saw.
literally.
But that's what
And
you saw.
someone
But
who
I'm
wouldn't
talking
take
about what did they see?
Who, Uvalde?
Yeah.
Well, they
I mean-
were mad at Abbott. They were like, he hasn't come to see us. He hasn't come to any of the funerals.
Yeah,
He has. They were
infuriated.
very
in many
vocal and
ways.
public about it, and that's why it's such a shock, because they were coming out saying this is unbelievable that this man hasn't even come out to speak to any of us.
Screamish, what
So
were you were trying to say something. Screamish
I'm sorry.
joy.
Oh
What were you
no, I
saying?
I agree. I think he infuriated people in a lot of ways, and he really truly didn't show leadership at any level of the process. I mean, he kept sidestepping, he kept blaming, other people for giving him the wrong information. He just acted like a victim. And that was in press conferences, that was on mainstream news. It was very, very easy to see him not perform. I just don't get how people, I just don't get it. I mean, from my perspective, saying something like it could have been worse to an audience who just lost, 20 something children and adults. And it's like, why would those words ever even come out of your mouth?
Well, this gets to the point that, and in really deeply red areas, and much of rural Texas is deeply red, and Uvalde is, I don't know if you call it exactly rural, but
Yeah.
it's a little town. It's pretty rural.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
And people who are like deeply red somebody could break into their house and murder all their family and then run as a Republican, and they would still vote for them because they ran as a Republican, because the idea of voting for a Democrat is just, they can't even imagine it. They're going to vote for a Republican because he's a Republican.
That's literally what they did.
Yeah.
Having grown up in a deeply red West Texas family, I watched how that happened. And my parents were very Republican. My dad gave lots of money to Republicans. And I would bring up being the the evil child. I would talk about the things that they were doing wrong. No, that didn't happen. And there's this denial is, definitely not a river in Egypt. It was a state of mind of the Texas Republicans, has been for a long time, who have a hard time convincing people that the thing that their hero just did was evil. I mean, even though it is obviously evil.
So it's cult behavior.
That's
what we're really saying.
It is. Thank you for saying that. It is. I was just thinking it's so incongruent. The cognitive dissonance is almost unbelievable. And when you watch it play out the way that did, and just that one particular situation, but we've watched our leadership fail us here in multitudes of ways. And we just have this three-headed monster that we can't seem to break their spell over.
They may be evil, but they're not communists.
Boy. Well, look at
I don't know that we know who or what they are.
Look at Dan Paxton. Now there's a real guy to look up to or down on. I mean,
how many felony indictments does he have now?
And
when is he going to go to trial? What happened to speedy trials?
And he cruised through the election.
I only refer to him by his frat boy named K-Pax. I refuse to give him the dignity of a full name. K-Pax, he's slick.
He's Teflon Dan. I mean, it just rolls right off of him.
And the fact that he beat Rochelle Garza by 10 percentage points, I kind of almost feel like tells you everything you need to know about Texas.
Yeah.
Like here's a guy with multiple felony indictments. He's the #1 law enforcement agent in the state. We already elected him once with felony indictments, and then we re-elected him again. And for some reason, he doesn't go to trial. What is that?
His entire staff tried to take him out. I mean, like they literally tried to pull a coup on him and couldn't get away with it. His wife in the Senate tried
to make it legal. All the things that he did that were illegal, make them legal so that she could get him off the hook.
I'm kind of embarrassed because I have been saying to my friends outside Texas for a while that Texas is turning purple.
But so it is. It's just turning purple way slower than you wanted it to, and way slower than Beto thought it was going to turn.
I think it's turning purple because people are being strangled. That's what's happening.
but like,
agree with that.
More purple in honor of Texas turning purple, but you're right. It's not happening fast enough.
Do we think that Beto was really a good candidate?
I mean, I think he was a great candidate. It's just Texas wasn't ready for him.
Okay, so like
we weren't purple enough.
And do you remember who we ran last year or last time?
The answer is
mean-
I do, but that's because I'm paid to know. I think nobody else.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, he was
I
the
do
only
think
one.
that Beto was he was a substantially better candidate than our last candidate, but
Ben Lupi,
Then
yes.
Lupe Valdez.
but he's you know, he's progressive, and I think you're right. He's like he's a little bit ahead of I mean, he's where a lot of us want to be, but he's a little bit ahead of where Texas is ready to be.
So I can give you a way to think of how Texas is purpling. So the state is gerrymandered. And for the record, for the people that haven't figured this out yet, gerrymandering is the equivalent of ballot stuffing. The way you're cheating is you're just drawing the lines so that the outcome is determined. How's that different than just going and changing the numbers? So Texas has been gerrymandered pretty much its whole history, but since the Republicans managed to do it in 2002, it's been consistently over gerrymandered in favor of the Republicans. Well, going in from the last census, we had 6 competitive districts. So there were, the majority of the districts were Republican, but there were 6 that were competitive. This new census has made it so there's only 1 competitive district because the Republicans gave the Democrats 5 of the competitive districts. The reason they did that was to pack Democrats into them so that the districts they already had wouldn't become competitive. And so, in other words, the Republicans are in Texas in defense mode, trying to hold on to what they have. They're not gaining. So by the next census, at the rate whites are disappearing from Texas, and as long as the Republican Party doesn't figure out how to flip Hispanics, by the next census, then they may not be able to gerrymander the state in such a way that they'll be able to control the legislature and the number of representatives going to Washington.
Sounds like they created some Democratic ghettos with their gerrymandering.
I'm happy about it. I'm now in one of those. Lloyd Doggett is now my
I
representative.
was about to bring that up.
Yeah.
Me too.
Lives in this district.
I live right down the street.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, that remember to vote card you found on your house the other day. My
Yeah,
wife
that was
put
you.
it there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lloyd Doggett
Nice.
is an amazing man. I love him.
So another
much.
way to think of it for me personally is when I moved to this house 7 years ago, I had a Republican representative for the US. I had a Texas Republican senator. I had a Texas Republican representative. As of January, I'll have 3 Democrats.
Nice.
And
That
then I
is
didn't
nice.
move.
Thanks for bringing that all the way down to the ground, because I think that, again, I go back to that local movement is so important and critical, and we need to get people more excited about it. We need to get people more connected to the fact that their local representatives they're accessible, they're a part of their community, they are right there. And I think it's cool that you can look at it from that perspective and be like, yeah, my representation has actually changed.
In this neighborhood that Roy and I live in is really a purple neighborhood. I mean, you drive around and to the extent that you see signs, a lot of people don't put anything up, but you see that there are a lot of Democrats here and there are a lot of Republicans here.
Well, I'm not seeing the Republican signs in this neighborhood.
Oh, well, you should come over to my cul-de-sac.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go over to your cul-de-sac because everything else.
Well,
is
out
just blue.
here in Bastrop County, you will see, they're already putting out Trump in 2024 signs. I just saw one down the street.
I
Immediately
will
crossed that
say
street off of
that
my
I have
side.
noticed a slightly reduced amount of gunfire, and I just want to call that out as a celebratory positive. Okay,
That's another thing. We were all thinking that there was going to be real violence and voter intimidation in a big way in this election, and it didn't happen.
Well,
Do you
that's what we
think
were
a lot
told.
of that was squashed by the fact that they did the January 6th investigation and made it a big deal? And I'm guessing there's some of these people that might have gone crazy during the election said, well, I don't want to be one of those people that gets called up for a grand jury, because it was
Well,
very
speaking
much
of that,
it.
so what happens if we lose the House and the Senate? What happens to that committee?
It's
It goes away.
It's
Yeah.
gone.
Bye-bye.
Actually, if we lose the House, the committee goes away.
Yeah, the House,
Oh, so
is-
it's going away then.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not done yet. I think there's probably like a 15% chance the Democrats keep the House. We're not going to know for days because we need the votes to roll in.
Yeah.
But on that note, I want to point something out, which is the following: midterm elections since 1902. Every time we have a midterm election, the president's party gets pretty badly beaten in the House. The average probably is that the president's party will lose 25 or so House seats. For Democrats, it's always higher because Democrats think that you only vote once every 4 years instead of a little bit more than that, which is probably closer to like 6 to 8 times every 4 years, just for the
Yeah.
record, because there's those primaries and then there's those weird May votes. What are those for? And then there might be runoff elections. Like if you're one every
like
4
Herschel
years, you're like
Walker.
1/8 what you ought to be doing. So what happens? Like I'll give you some numbers. In 1994, Bill Clinton's Democrats lost 54 seats in the House.
Oh,
And then in 2010, if memory serves me, Obama lost 63 seats. And Obama said it was a massacre. And he was right, it was. Biden's looking at losing maybe 7 seats, 9 seats. In other words, and he may keep the Senate. And it's entirely possible that the Democrats will even gain a seat in the Senate. So what's crazy is this is not a traditional election. The president's party did not get punished. And so in that regard, I think Democrats need to refocus and realize, oh, wait, we just missed a bullet here. This was definitely not as bad as it usually is.
Well, and he was criticized for making it about democracy, but that worked. And that's exactly what he really needed to do.
And it was exactly about democracy. We had all these election deniers.
Yeah.
And then there's 2024. And like we're going to do a really big party at my house for 2024 because it's going to be our last election.
Do you think the improvement for Biden could be somewhat related to the fact that we have a growing social media influence on politics that didn't exist in some of the previous elections, or wasn't as widespread as previous elections? And I've just seen that people are finally getting access to information that they never really experienced before. It's, if you go out into West Texas, all that you get is right-wing media on the AM radio, because the internet is still kind of spotty, or very spotty out there. But in the metro areas, everybody has access to social media. Do you think that had an impact?
I actually think social media has destroyed the United States' chance of surviving another 10 years. I think what people do is they are friends with the same minded people. They don't hear what the other person says. And it's just about a bunch of shouting. Twitter is like where people go to become 6-year-olds and say really ugly things you would never say to a person's face. You know what I mean?
yes.
Because they punch you and break your nose.
And now it's ridiculous. This Mr. Free Speech guy is like taking down and kicking out all these people who are making fun of him.
Yeah. And I'm hoping he loses his $44 billion by destroying
that's what I'm hoping.
Will, because he's an idiot.
2 twits with 1 stone.
So I'm sorry, Scoop. I just trashed your idea completely. I feel like what we've done in social media for the last 10 years is we've just created these little echo chambers, and we jump into them and we don't listen to the other side. And then we throw cognitive dissonance into the mix, and everything just is scary.
Oh yeah, I agree with the it's a real shitstorm on most social media, but there is still a way of getting out good information to people that didn't have access to it before. So that has some effect, but you just have, smart people can generally filter out the bad stuff.
I guess I'm looking for the smart people.
You're gonna have to go beyond Texas borders, I'm afraid.
I mean, just the fact that we have a governor that killed 750 people because he's incompetent and couldn't make the electrical grid work in the largest energy producing state in the largest energy producing nation on earth.
Oh God.
Like, it's humiliating. Texas is competing with Saudi Arabia for the amount of energy it produces. And we couldn't keep the lights on and keep people from freezing to death. The Uvalde thing, he took it, right, the abortion stuff, like all the stuff stacked on it, he beat Beto by 11 percentage points. Like, what is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
5 to 8%.
It's unfortunate though. And it's like, it's hard to not be, I mean, I don't know, to feed the divisiveness. I don't like to think that they're not smart people. I think that we underestimate just how incredibly manipulative, like, neural linguistic programming and mass media really is. And smart people can get pretty easily caught up. And, to your point, like social media in and of itself, ultimately, it is just a tool, just like the television and the telephone and any other communication device we've ever had. It's just a matter of utilizing that tool, and it has just as much power to do good things as it does to do really, really bad things. I feel like a lot of times complacency kills us almost more than anything, where, like to the point of just not showing up at the polls. There's no reason why we shouldn't have, I'm sorry, there's no reason we shouldn't have 80% plus voter turnout. There just is simply no reason that we shouldn't. There's no real reason,
You're opening the door. You're opening the door to a conversation about Twitter, I think.
Well,
which has been, it's just been a really big deal in the last couple of weeks. So
absolutely. Twitter in and of itself, and whatever Elon decides to ultimately do with it, again, it's just a tool and a platform. And to give it that much power that we've given it, we're being shown something about the impermanence of these tools that we're so freaking dependent on. And it's not just the trust factor, now we can pay for our blue check, right? Well, who's going to know $8. Like who paid for their blue check? It's like that is already gone. And so, but it was really never there to begin with. Like, it's your perception that trust factor was there to begin with. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say, how influential is Twitter really? I mean, I keep thinking, I think the main way that Twitter is influential is in the fact that there are a lot of journalists on Twitter who kind of work there in a way. But, if they leave, what's left? I mean, Twitter is not what's creating that influence. It's the participants in Twitter. And if everybody migrates over to Mastodon, which is a much saner environment.
For now, until everybody moves over.
But structurally, the way that it's structured and the way that it was built and the ethics of the guy who created it and the ethics that he sort of imposed on the system are such that I think it would be really, really hard it's not even a capitalist project, right? It's a distributed, it's a federated project. It's distributed, and it's set up to discourage the kind of exploitive things that you see on Twitter. And that makes me think that, Mastodon may not be the ultimate place where people go. There's a lot of people moving there right now, but it is possible to build systems that are not, sort of like deeply capitalist manipulative systems that exist mainly to exploit the users. And that's what Rochko has done with Mastodon. That's what Tom Jennings, our friend Tom Jennings, did that years ago with FidoNet. which was also a federated system. And Mastodon is part of a bigger thing, which is like the independent web, indie web, and what they're calling the Fediverse. The whole idea of having federation. So instead of having centralized systems, you're decentralized. You federate the systems so that they can work together and interact, but they're also independent systems. And it's hard to build a power base in a structure like that. That's what I think.
One of the things, though, that I think we need to remember about like our devices is when we had TV in the 70s and there was 3 TV stations, well, 4, because we did PBS, and that was amazing, because now we have this really tall yellow bird that the Republicans got rid of, and now he's on HBO. But anyway, so I still can't wrap my mind around this. Why did you hate Big Bird? Anyway, so
You represented too much sunshine and joy. Okay,
exactly. You were limited in what you could do because you turned the knob and it went as you changed the channel, and you watched what was on. That was your option. There wasn't another option. Whereas now we're constantly taking our devices and we're flipping through them, and we're getting dopamine hits every time we do the device. And so there's this reinforcement feedback loop. Like I find myself nervously just opening the device. I don't even know why I opened it. And I'm like, oh, well, I might as well look for something to look at.
It's, we're gonna have to learn as a humanity how to be a true community again, and that has been our challenge in this new cyberspace that we exist in, and we've lost our community outside of it. And it's interesting when I've had plenty of experiences recently, even with pretty diverse groups of people coming together for reasons non-political, not realizing that they hate each other. I always find that really interesting when, they if in another scenario, these would all be people that would be like, hateful or judging or whatever they were, fearful or whatever that energy is that's coming out. But in these situations, they're coming together, over these, whatever unifying elements that are, again, more community driven, not necessarily political. And they'll make these discoveries like, oh, you believe that, or you think that. And it's just interesting to see people trying to relearn how to meet each other where they're at again, instead of, because we have to take a step back. If we come at everybody as the other and we're ready to fight, well, if you come ready to fight, you're fighting. And there are some things we need to be fighting about that we, again, seem to fall into complacency on. But we also need to figure out how to find our humanity with each other again. Like that's critical, or really we just don't have, honestly.
I understand what you're saying, but I also have reached the point where I don't see any humanity in any of those people who were at the insurrection, any of those people who are so hateful and scream epithets at people. I have no
I don't know that I'm speaking
desire.
about those specific people.
Okay.
I mean, that's a specific extreme. I think there's a wide swath of people that have been like divided in a hard line, but they really live more, they're just not living as far to the edge as everybody is forcing them in. And I think the more
if you look at Georgia, I mean, you look at
divided.
Georgia, and it seems to me like it's not just fringe, like, I mean, people normal people voted for
again, these
Herschel
are
Walker.
anecdotal experiences, but I think when people actually do try to come together, it's better. I just do. I just think that, people, we are watching like major things happen. Like and this is something that's always a wonderment to me, as we watch natural disasters take out entire communities and completely destroy them. We just had Florida get double hit by their second hurricane, and I mean, they're devastated. And I'm sorry.
No, it's because God hates Florida.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, we can blame God, but
He's
at the end of
not
the
wrong.
day, at the end of the day, the politics of those people, they don't matter. They don't matter when all of their homes are gone. You know, it
Oh.
becomes a very and at that community level, it becomes a very different experience.
But
Not at that.
Florida just went red as red could be. So
Well,
know
that's
they
what I
did.
was about to say. That we've been talking about how there wasn't really a red wave this time, but
There
there
was. It was
was, and it was in
Florida.
Florida. Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
I mentioned Florida in particular because it comes back to our complacency, who's showing up at the polls, who's doing what, where. But on the ground in those communities at that moment of crisis, those people are not asking each other what their politics are. And I know this from personal experience. And so, yeah, it's like this is it, and we just have to recognize that those commonalities, we're going to be facing them more and more. And I don't know, again, I think it's a mix of things. I don't think it's just so easy to say that they're just so divided and they're not, that we have completely lost our humanity.
You know,
I
so, and this isn't a natural disaster, but I will say that when I was living in North Carolina, and you know, Bernie was a thing, and this woman got her car broke down, and she was on the side of the road, and it was snowing, and she called a tow truck, and the guy came and he hooked her up, and then he noticed that she had a Bernie sticker in the back. He unhooked her and left her there on the side of the road. So
yeah.
I feel like that
I know that there are assholes and
still-
scroats out
yeah,
there that are
I think
doing
it's still
shitty things.
yeah,
That-
I'm just saying that I think I hear what you're saying, that when people come to, but it's just like saying reach across the aisle. You know, I'm not coming together with these people anymore. I can't. I'll come together with the median, you know, but some of these people are just too far out, and they're still voting for people like Herschel Walker, and they're telling me they're normal, and I don't believe it.
Well,
I
you know,
find that
I see
incomprehensible,
some
just
hope
like you
in
do.
Florida's red wave, in the fact that we have someone in their Republican Party coming out against Trump. So I see a split
Yeah, but he thinks
possibly
he's God.
happening. I would certainly love to see that, to where you've got dueling crazy people, you know, fighting for the
That is going to be
for the
so
crown.
fun.
It's true, they are fighting for the
Yes.
crown. They
Oh
really,
my
really, I
God.
don't disagree with that.
But
The
you know, that's
nicknames
always
are already
good for the
starting.
other party, because you know, when you get that third party or a third candidate in there to split the voters, you know, that's sometimes a good thing.
Before
Yeah.
we move away from Florida, I just want to throw some fun stats out.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. So DeSantis won 4 years ago with 1%. It was a
Wow.
close election. He just won with 20% in this election. The Democratic Party spent $50 million in Florida 4 years ago. It spent $1.5 million in Florida this time. So the Democratic Party went into the race knowing that Charlie Crist had no chance. They spent no money on him or anybody else, which means they just accepted that Florida was permanently red and it was no longer a swing state, and they walked away.
Don't you think that's what we did in Texas when Lupe ran?
Well, so for sure. I mean, but you know, Hillary Clinton did that to us too in 2016. She didn't spend any money. At one point, she was in August of 2016. She was actually ahead in Texas in the polls. And I kept thinking, why aren't you trying to see if you could do something here? Spend some money here. And you know, she just was like, I've got my blue wall. There's no way Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania will ever vote against me. I'm gonna just campaign in the swing states and see if I can flip them. And it was the worst strategy ever, because she wasn't looking at state by state polling. She was just looking at the national polling, going, I'm gonna win by 3 percentage points. It was
Speaking of Pennsylvania, Fetterman just trounced Oz. Well, not trounced, but still won.
Yeah, it was a solid victory.
Solid
It's good because it looks like the Republicans are going to pick up Nevada, so it'll cancel.
Yeah, I hope that prevents more TV and media superstars from getting into politics just because they're
Please.
famous on TV. It's like that has not been a good thing for anybody.
No,
And
no.
a quack.
I don't think we're done with that trend yet, unfortunately. I think we're going to see a few more personality cult members come out.
Man, if Herschel Walker can do it,
Okay, so can I just say, I can't wait for Jesse the Body Ventura to come back.
oh
boy.
man, that's gonna be so awesome.
And I
Dang.
feel like we should blame Reagan for all of this.
Yeah, yeah. Ventura was what, Minnesota?
Minnesota.
It
yeah.
was Minnesota. Yeah, it was Minnesota. We could was Frank in Minnesota also?
Who?
Al Franken.
Franken, no,
Oh.
he's
Yeah. Where was
No, I thought he was Minnesota. Was he?
I thought he
oh
was
yeah, he
Minnesota
is
too.
Minnesota. You're right, he is.
Yeah. That's like
But
I have to
Franken
look.
was like, Franken was more of a comedy writer than he was anything else. I mean, he kind of did some stuff on SNL, but
yeah.
he was
But he was
he-
celebrity-esque.
yeah, yeah.
He was celebrity-esque.
But again, I think it's a Reagan thing. It definitely is a Reagan thing that started it. But
oh yeah.
Okay, so let's do a blue wave because there was Michigan. And
Yes.
Gretchen Whitmer won by 10.5 percentage points. So that was a
I
nice
love
solid
her
victory.
so
Nobody
much.
kidnapped her.
And nobody
Nobody-
kidnapped her. But there's another victory in Michigan that's even more important. And it's this. Michigan has switched its district drawing over to a nonpartisan commission.
Mhm.
Oh,
And there are multiple states that have
wow.
done this now, including Arizona. And I want to talk about Arizona for a sec too before we run out of time. But in the case of Michigan, the amazing thing about this is the Democrats got the same percentage point that they did 4 years ago. But they have now double the seats. That's the role that gerrymandering plays. The Republicans had so gerrymandered the Michigan Democrats that they were literally getting half the representation they were
Wow.
earning.
I wish somebody would come and do that here and then expose it.
Texas would be really purple at that point. And the reason
Would
I
be
can say it
blue.
with so much confidence is that's what happened in Arizona. So the Texas doesn't have the ability for us voters to put something on the ballot, right? Only the state legislature can. Arizona, Michigan, these other places that have democracies, they actually can do that. Their citizens have the right to create laws and put them on the ballot. So in the case of Arizona, they put on the ballot that they were going to switch district drawing to a nonpartisan commission. It passed. So the state legislature sued. It's the best Supreme Court decision name ever. It's Arizona State Legislature versus the state of Arizona.
Oh my God.
And the Supreme Court ruled that the state of Arizona had the constitutional right to do this. So it
I
happened.
love this.
It's a done deal.
Oh my
Since
God.
I'm just
then-
wondering if Texas has the track record for number of lawsuits and federal injunctions against their gerrymandering practices.
If it isn't Texas, it's North Carolina, and their flag is just flipped upside down.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's clearly some kind of flag design thing.
It's a weird. I mean, like when I lived there, I was like, my God, they really do want to be like Texas. They're just as racist and horrible and awful as Texas is.
Or is it
And then
that
I-
we want to be like North Carolina?
No.
Texas only wants to be like Texas.
Yeah.
That's just the truth of Texas.
So since the nonpartisan commission in Arizona, that red state has elected one Democratic senator, it might be two, we'll see what the results are, and voted for Joe Biden, but statewide seats can't be gerrymandered.
Yeah.
In other words, bringing it back to what Squeamish Joy said earlier, bringing it back to the local, once you took gerrymandering off the table in Arizona, people who were upset about the fact they couldn't affect down ballot political positions
Racist.
began voting, and they affected the up ballot stuff that isn't affected by gerrymandering. That's the power of gerrymandering. It actually dissuades people from voting.
Well,
Oh,
you were talking
I-
about flags. There was this flag that back when Pinochet
The hell is that?
that's the
That's
flag
Chile's
of
flag.
Chile.
Oh,
And
Chile.
back when
Okay.
Pinochet was the big guy in Chile, they had an event, I forget where it happened, where they were supposed to raise the flag of Chile and they put up the Texas flag because
Ah!
They did.
I have an even more embarrassing story. I think maybe it is the same level of embarrassing. The Texas government textbook that I was using for a while, the first edition had the Chilean flag on the front. The publisher put the wrong flag on the Texas
That's
government.
awesome.
Oh my God.
But it was just the first edition. They figured it out by the second.
Oh, good.
Well, they stopped putting flags on the cover just to be safe.
Just to be safe. Yeah. Just they stopped putting the word Texas on the cover. They didn't want to like confuse it. It's just the ambiguity.
God, that's just fucking heartbreaking.
I just noticed we're getting close to the end, and I just noticed that Debbie Russell has been posting a number of things in our chat.
Oh,
Whatever she
Wow.
has to contribute, it'll be amazing.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff in
Yeah.
here. The Supreme Court's order followed a request by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to reverse the report. So that was earlier on, and that happened in some other states. While voter turnout was down from 2018 across Texas, it seems Travis County failed the most with a 10+% drop.
I believe it.
I hate us.
And that's crazy because like in 2000, Travis County was accounted for like 90% of Texas's votes.
Mhm.
That was an exaggeration, but I mean, we
A lot.
were really
Yeah.
overrepresented. So what happened to us?
Yeah,
a lot
Well,
of people were,
I couldn't figure it out.
We couldn't even fucking pick a mayor. All right.
Okay, that's an amazing story. How did Celia Israel beat Kirk Watson by 5%?
I'm telling you, man, people are tired of the old white dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
even
true.
got my mom. I
couldn't
told
believe
my
it. I was
mom
like,
and my
yes.
aunt, I was like, hey mom, y'all have to come and vote on the runoff. And she said, who is it? And I said, well, it's this woman, Celia Israel, and she's running against Kirk Watson. She said, I'll vote against Kirk Watson 50 times in a row if I could. So she's going to come out and vote for a Democrat just to get Watson, just to kiss Watson, make him kiss her ass. I think it's funny.
And your mom, as I recall, is not known for voting for Democrats.
No, she is not. She just wants to
See?
vote against Kirk. No,
See,
she
this
doesn't.
is
She
an
is-
opportunity. This is exactly my point, though. It's not reaching across the aisle. It's just making sure that there's a threshold for them to step over. You know, it's like not putting up a wall is the way I try to look at it. It's like, no, I don't have to go over there or change my values, but I'm certainly going to allow space for, you know, like, I mean, so she'll vote for a Democrat. And that'll be exciting, and it won't kill her. And she'll have to live with the fact that it didn't kill her.
In our chat, Debbie posted hashtag Team Celia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Celia,
Yeah.
yes.
I certainly
badass
hope that the
thing.
It's
voters
so
come
amazing.
back for
I'm blown away.
I hope the voters come back for 2024, though, because you know who's threatening to be around then. And we definitely have to have a lot of people to vote against he who shall not be named.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
think this election actually suggests that 2024 is going to be like that. Even though voter turnout was low, the fact that there wasn't the midterm punishment that we normally get, it's mind blowing.
No, it absolutely is. It's
But Florida and Ohio are no longer swing states. We just need to recognize they're red. That's over. Stop talking
It's a
about it.
done deal. Done deal.
Done deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to be grateful for the little victories, and I'm really hoping that is Boebert, has it been called? It hasn't been called, has it?
No, there's still votes to count, and I think there's enough votes that, well, I don't really know. I don't know.
Would there be a runoff there?
I don't think they need a majority like we do in Austin or
Okay.
Georgia does.
I suppose in the minute we have left, I could look it up.
I'm
And
trying
see
to
if
get there
there's-
and I'm failing miserably.
just-
Let's see.
Okay, no, it's not called yet. She's at 50.2%, with 98% reporting. So there's 2 percentage points of voters left to try and shave off 0.2% of her vote. It's
Mm.
possible.
Yeah,
It's-
the key is where are those 2%? Let's hope they're in a metropolitan area.
Yeah, who knows? She's District 3. I don't remember where District 3 is in Colorado.
Why?
And you know,
Why
the
don't I
Katie,
remember where it is in Colorado?
Yeah, no, why
Because they
is
keep
that?
changing the map.
the Katie Porter race in California is also not decided.
All right,
yet.
District 3 is the entire west and south. So it's not, there's no urban center. Pueblo, Colorado is the only urban center in it. So
Oh,
Here we
God.
are. Time to go again. This
There we
has
go.
been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks.
Thank you.
Great seeing you guys.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.